Hey there, superstar. Welcome back to part 5 of how to create a webinar that sells. And in this video, we're talking about crafting your content to convert. Let's go. You are in luck because today I'm going to be sharing with you my fabulous, handy-dandy, always works, never fails system to structure content in a way that takes people on a journey and makes them want whatever you're offering at the end of the journey. Well, if they're a right fit, right? So it gets rid of the people that are not a fit and it pulls people who are a fit closer. Are you ready? Awesome. Here's what I know and what I've learned over the years is that the right structure is everything. It creates consistent results. It creates reliability, sustainability. So when you find a structure that works, you stick to it. You don't reinvent the wheel every time. And one of the biggest things I've seen with webinars is people coming up with a great topic and then sitting in front of a computer like, where do I even begin? How do I put this thing together? And so the structure that I'm going to share with you, basically I use for everything. You may have heard me talk about it before, but today I'm going to talk about it in the context of webinars. My structure is very simple. It's not the only structure that works. Certainly there are probably infinitely many structures that could work, but this structure always works. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? The structure I'm going to share with you is one that is generous, that provides great value, and it doesn't overgive either. One of the things with webinars that doesn't work very well is when we overwhelm people with information. I know that can be a strategy, and there's a case to be made for like overwhelming people so then they need your help. But I'm a bigger believer, instead of doing that, which I think creates a dependent type of relationship where clients are like, I need you, I must have you, you need to help me, which I don't enjoy working with clients in that energetic. This structure creates possibility, creates excitement, creates people leaning in and from an empowered place, all right? And so the structure provides the right balance of valuable content and also, hey, let's keep going. Let's move on together. Now, I do want to give some credit to some of the amazing humans who taught me what I know, or some of what I know. A lot of it I discovered myself. And when it comes to creating content that converts, there are a few that stand out. One of those is Dave VanHoose. He and his partner at the time, Dustin Mathews, had a company together called Speaking Empire. And that was my very first foray into crafting content with the intention of it leading to something else. For many years, early in my business, I just crafted content and gave it away and crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. And what I learned from Dave and from Dustin was how to create content that converts, from Dave especially, and from Dustin, how to create an offer that's so compelling and so juicy that it converts. And by the way, if you're curious about this, you can actually hear my interviews with each of them in my podcast. So I have an interview with Dave VanHoose and an interview with Dustin Mathews. Dave, we talk about presentations that sell, and with Dustin, offers that convert. So I highly recommend checking those out. In fact, I'm going to ask my team, please, if you could find those links and put them below, I would super appreciate it. And while we're at it, why don't you take a minute and just like my videos, subscribe to my channel so that you'll get notified every time I drop a new video into this mini course and beyond, and shoot me a comment below. Love to hear from you. And I also learned a lot about webinars in particular from Russell Brunson. He's like the Mac Daddy of webinars. He has a great resource called The Perfect Webinar Formula, which I studied over and over again and I've integrated into my own process. And finally, one more recent person that I've discovered that has taught me a lot about webinars is Tom Poland. He has a whole strategy for co-marketing webinars. He has a very different approach to content development for webinars, and I really like it, and I highly recommend him as well. So those are some of my inspiration. That's some of my inspiration for this, and I've worked this on, woven all this together, and aligned it to how I like to do this. All right, let's go. So here's my structure, and by the way, this is the exact structure that I use in my YouTube videos as well. So I'm going to lay it out for you and then I'll dive into each piece. The first piece of any material is a hook and then a content hook. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention, I learned this from somebody else that I didn't mention before. His name is Nate Woodbury, and he's actually the producer of my YouTube channel. And he's the one that introduced me to the concept of a hook and content hooks. So hook, content hook, then why, what, who, how, now. That's it. Hook, content hooks, why, what, who, how, now. Let me dive into each piece. This is how I structure every single webinar and every single piece of content I put together. The hook is the piece that draws you in. It's the part that opens up your imagination, that gets you excited, and that makes you want to lean in and stay for the whole thing. So for example, the hook might be as simple as, do you want to learn how to make money with your webinars? That's a hook, because the answer to that question, by the way, should always be yes. And in general, pro tip here, never ask a question to which the answer is no. Why? Because you want to train people over the course of your webinar to say yes and yes and yes and yes. So that's just a little extra nugget there. The content hooks are very similar to that initial hook. The content hooks are intended to let people know, here's what I'm going to cover, here's what I'm going to cover, here's what I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to cover this amazing thing all the way at the end. Guess why we want to do that? We want to do that because we want them to watch all the way to the end. Because what's at the end of our webinar? Our offer. And so we want people to stay all the way through till the very end. And that is why I always structure, if I do Q&A in a webinar, which I always do, and I'll talk about that in a moment, I always put it after the offer. Because people want to ask questions, I want to keep them there through the offer, and then they can ask questions at the end. All right, so hook, content hooks. Next piece is why. Why is where you set up the big problem, the problem that your webinar is addressing. In my case, my webinars, they deal with the problem of how to grow your coaching business, how to drive monthly recurring revenues, how to have more joy and fulfillment, how to fill your programs with grace and ease. That is what sets up the why for why people would want to stay and listen to the whole webinar, and what is the problem that the webinar is going to solve. Oh, by the way, I like to distinguish between two different whys. There's a little why and a big why. The little why is the why for the viewer that is there, like, how's this going to serve your life? What's the problem that you are facing? And sometimes I like to also talk about the big why, like the why in the world, right? Why the world needs people to have a more successful business. Why it benefits everybody when people are more joyful and more fulfilled, right? So the little why and the big why. The next piece is the what. The what is the solution. The what is the thing that you're laying out in the webinar. It's the answer to the problem, right? So in my case, when I do my webinars, it's about how to grow the business. The solution is you need to have a big back end. You need to have monthly recurring revenue. That's going to create more joy, more fulfillment, more safety, more breathing room so you can create. So the what is something that I'm making it, I know it is, very juicy, very exciting. It's something that they want and need. Now, by the way, this whole beginning maybe takes about 5 or 7 minutes to set up. We're not taking a lot of time here. We're setting it up pretty quickly. We're moving through the hook, the content hooks, the why and the what pretty quickly. Then we move into the who. And the who is you, your credibility and your story. And I like it in that order, credibility, then story. So what I like to do is a slide. Most of this is happening. I usually do most of my webinars with slideshows. There's a slide that lays out your credibility, why you're qualified to talk about this, what you've achieved or accomplished in this space, what credentials or certifications you might have, what awards maybe you've won. But you keep it quick. This is no more than a minute. And it's one slide and it lays out your credibility. You might even want to title it, this is what I got from Dave VanHoose, who am I and why should you even listen to me? Because that's what people are wondering. Like, who is this person? Why should I even listen to them? So just do it. Call it forward and say it. You might be wondering, who am I? Why you should even listen to me? Well, here's this and this and this and this and this. Quick. Then we move into your story. And your story is the story that relates to the topic. It doesn't have to be your life story. Maybe sometimes it is your life story, but you don't want it to take a whole lot of time to tell. I would say you want to do your story that illustrates the challenge, the problem, the solution, how you overcame the thing in about 5 to 10 minutes max. And so, for example, when I do my credibility and then I tell my story, I share the story of how I got myself so deep into workaholism in my coaching and consulting and speaking business that I got sick and I had a breakdown and I had to restructure my business in order to create more joy, more fulfillment, and more revenues. So that's my story. So I can basically say, hey, listen, I've been where you are. I know what it's like to want to grow your business and not have the bandwidth to be able to do it. And so this is what I discovered, right? So that's, you lay out your story, that's the who. And then we move into the next section, which is the how. This is the bulk of your webinar. The how is where you lay out your content. In my case, my webinar, and what I recommend is 3 secrets or 3 pillars or 3 foundational elements. And my favorite way to do this, and this is something I learned from Russell Brunson, is to have it be 3 counterintuitive things, meaning it's not what you think. So for example, in my retreat, I have a retreat webinar where I'm teaching people how to make money and profit from retreats. That's my webinar. Well, the first secret, the first how pillar that I tell is the money is not in the retreat. It's in the big back end. So this is like, whoop, I'm flipping it around. I'm like, I just told them, I'm going to teach them how to make money with retreats. And now the very first secret I'm telling them is actually the money isn't in the retreat. It's in what comes after the retreat. And then I share that whole pillar. So I recommend having at least, not even at least, I like 3. 3 is a really good number. 5, it already starts to get too heavy and weighted down and takes away from your offer at the end. So I would suggest having it be 3 things, maybe 2, maybe 4, but really 3 is good. 3 things that are counterintuitive. So that's where you give your juicy content. This is where you're basically waking them up to like, wow, I never thought of it that way. You want them to have aha moments in your webinar such that they're like, wow, this person really knows what they're talking about and they're real. They're being straight up with me, right? And that's one thing I do, by the way, throughout the webinar. I'm not blowing sunshine up there, you know what. I'm actually telling them the real deal because I don't actually want clients that aren't committed. So I'm not pretending that this is easier than it actually is. So you did the how, and then there's the now. The now is your offer. The now is, well, what I do is there's a transition to your offer. When I get to the how, I like to tell people, I remind them, hey, here's everything we've covered. We've covered this, we've covered this, we've covered this. We talked about this, we nailed this. Like, here's all the cool stuff we did. In a moment, I'm going to open it up for questions. But before we do that, I want to share with you a really special, exciting opportunity that I want to share with you to see if for those of you who are here that are really excited about this and want to take this to the next level and go deeper, I want to share this special offer with you. So that's my transition. I do the offer, which I'll talk about in another video because this video is getting long, and I'll do my whole offer as a separate piece, do the offer, and then from the offer, that whole thing, move into the Q&A. And from the Q&A, then let them go. So that is my webinar content structure. Stick around because in the next video, I'm going to talk about your offer, preparing your offer and presenting it on your webinar. And by the way, if you're loving this and you want to work with me, you're interested in one of my programs or products or services, let's connect. You can find me at superstaractivator.com/go.